Healthy planet, healthy you. Read the news and you'll be overwhelmed by all the different ways that our planet is in trouble. Greenhouse gases, global warming, disappearing rainforests, croplands turning into desert, starving children, and the extinction of plant and animal species. What if there was something that you could do that would help prevent all this? And what if that thing was also better for your own health? Well, it turns out that there is something, and the answer might surprise you. Eat less meat. I know, I love my meat too, but the research is overwhelming and it deserves to be heard. In early 2019, the Eat Lancet Commission published the results of a multi-year collaboration by 37 international experts from different fields, including food systems, environmental sustainability, nutrition, human health, economics, and politics. The Commission reviewed the existing high-quality research on diet, nutrition, and environmental sustainability in order to make recommendations about a diet that would maximize the health of humans and of our planet. In their recommendations, the Eat Lancet Commission calls for a great food transformation if we are going to be able to feed the 10 billion people that they estimate will populate our planet by the year 2050. One of the key changes that the Commission calls for is a reduction in consumption of meat, especially red meat. So why is red meat such a big deal? Why would it show up as a starring villain in an Environmental Health Commission's report? Let's take a closer look. First, let's talk about deforestation. We've all heard about the disappearing rainforests in South America and around the world. But did you know that beef production is one of the top reasons for deforestation? In South America, researchers found that the creation of cattle pastures accounted for over 70% of deforestation in South America between the years 1990 and 2005. In addition to the deforestation done to create grazing land for cattle, forests are also being cut down in order to provide land to grow the cattle's food. In fact, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations reports that animal feed crops consume 1/3 of the Earth's farmable land. This is in addition to the 1/4 of the Earth's land that is used for the animals themselves. This means less land to grow food for the Earth's growing population, since so much is going to livestock grazing and feed. We'll come back to this problem of how we use the Earth's limited cropland later. Let's move on to desertification. While some of the land used for grazing cattle is grassland that could not be used for growing crops, that is not the complete picture. In fact, we are losing farmable land at an alarming rate as a result of livestock grazing. In addition to deforestation, which can lead to desertification, overgrazing is one of the most significant factors that contributes to desertification, or the irreversible conversion of productive land into desert-like conditions. The arid ecosystems that cover 40% of the Earth's land are especially vulnerable to this, and 10 to 20% of this land has already suffered from desertification. This is especially concerning when you consider that over 2 billion people live in this land and rely on it for sustenance. Let's talk about endangered species next. The livestock industry threatens species of plants and animals in several ways. Habitat loss as a result of deforestation and desertification is the main threat for 85% of the species on the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Red List of Threatened Species. And as we've already discussed, animal agriculture is the largest driving force behind this habitat loss. In addition, some animal species with the potential for preying on livestock are hunted by humans to the point of extinction. Moving on, one of the biggest concerns about the livestock industry involves global warming and greenhouse gases. The greenhouse effect occurs when heat from the sun is trapped by gases like carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. As the levels of carbon dioxide rise, more heat from the sun is retained, and this causes the Earth's temperature to rise. When people think about the greenhouse effect, they usually think about the roles played by transportation and industry. However, when you look at the causes of worldwide greenhouse emissions, the livestock sector accounts for 18% of worldwide greenhouse gas emissions, compared with 15% for the transportation sector. So how are cows producing more greenhouse gases than the whole transportation industry? By belching. The digestive processes of cattle, sheep, and goats produce gases like nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, and methane. Methane in particular is a concern because the greenhouse effect of methane is 28 times as powerful as carbon dioxide. While the cows are producing more gas, deforestation and desertification to create their grazing pastures and croplands means that there are fewer trees and plants to absorb the carbon dioxide burped up by cows, further worsening the situation. When you calculate the amount of greenhouse gas emissions involved in growing, delivering, and cooking different types of food, the difference is striking. 6 ounces of chicken produces at least 3 times the amount of greenhouse gases as 6 ounces of broccoli, beans, tofu, or other vegetables, while pork produces twice as much as chicken. Beef and lamb were the worst culprits, producing more than 10 times the amount of greenhouse gases as the equivalent weight of vegetables or legumes. The effect is such that over the course of a year, if a family of 4 forgoes a steak dinner once a week, the reduction in greenhouse gases would be equivalent to the effect of taking their car off the road for almost 3 months of the year. Beyond greenhouse gas emissions, because energy is lost at each point along the food chain, meat, and especially red meat, is a much less efficient source of protein and energy than vegetables, grains, and legumes. For instance, to get 1 pound of chicken, you have to feed it 2.5 pounds of grain. However, we can't eat the whole chicken, and when you take out bones, feathers, etc., it takes 4.5 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of edible chicken. For pork, it takes 5 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of live weight pork, and 9.4 pounds of grain for 1 pound of edible pork. With beef, you need 10 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of live weight, and 25 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of edible weight. This math becomes a significant problem when you start to look at issues of world hunger. As our world's population grows, we also face the growing problem that there is not enough food to go around. Our Earth's population has been growing explosively since the 1900s, with little increased capacity for producing more food for the growing population. The Food and Agriculture Organization calculated in 2011 that excluding Antarctica, the Earth's land is 32% desert and arid land, 30% forest, 2.5% built-up land like cities, and 36% agricultural land. Of the agricultural land, 68% is used for grazing, 3.1% for permanent crops, and 28% for grains and legumes. However, 40% of the grain and legume land goes to growing crops for animals. In other words, 80% of agricultural land is used for animal agriculture, leaving only 20% for the crops that feed humans. Let's remember, you can feed a lot more people on 25 pounds of grain than you can on 1 pound of beef. Meanwhile, in 2011, 820 million people were undernourished, with 50 million children having physical wasting from lack of food, and 2 billion people were deficient in micronutrients. As the world's population continues to grow, the experts from Eat Lancet believe that the only way the Earth will be capable of producing enough food will be if we use our arable land more efficiently by reducing our meat consumption and designating less arable land for grazing and animal feed and more for growing crops for humans. The good news is that it's not just our planet that benefits from decreased meat consumption. A person's risk of stroke and type 2 diabetes increases linearly the more red meat he or she eats. Red meat also increases risk of coronary artery disease and total mortality. The International Agency for Research on Cancer found that salted or preserved red meat is a Group 1 carcinogen, and unprocessed red meat like steak is a Group 2 carcinogen. The Eat Lancet Commission recommended that consumption of red meat be limited to half an ounce per day or less, or 1/5 as much as the current intake of the average American. While the Commission's recommendations seem like a tiny amount of meat to most Americans, who at 222 pounds of meat per person per year consume more meat than any other country in the world. However, for those who live in developing countries, the Commission's recommendations would involve an increase in animal protein. For these impoverished populations, research showed improved health and performance outcomes when meat consumption, especially chicken and fish, is increased. It turns out that a more equitable distribution is also better for everyone's health. So, if you long to save rainforests, to prevent animal extinction, to end world hunger, and to reduce your carbon footprint, if you want to improve your own health, then start eating less meat, especially red meat. Our planet and your body will thank you for it.